Okay, so a couple quick announcements as we get moving forward here. First of all, so we're taking a tour to Israel. We have a team over there now, which is awesome, and keep them in your prayer. They're having an amazing time. And we are taking another tour April 26th through May 7th. And so we'll have all the links and stuff up on the website this week, and you'll be able to look at the itinerary and decide if it's your time to go. It's going to be an incredible trip. We've been working very hard to get all the details planned out, and we're doing some things we haven't done before. So even if you've been to Israel before, this one may have some new things that you haven't done. And we have some special guest speakers from the Mossad and from IDF that are going to be with us. And so it's going to be a terrific time of the ancient and the current, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So pray about if it's your time to go to Israel with us. We would love for you to do that. And I was invited to come up to, many of you know that I go to Madison, Huntsville area once a month and teach Torah. We've been doing that for 10 years now. And so the church up there and the Messianic ministry up there called One in Messiah has asked and invited me to do a quantum faith conference on November 7th and 8th. And so I will be teaching for that. Friday night is a Shabbat dinner and then a session. And then on Saturday morning after breakfast, we have 2 sessions, then lunch, then 2 sessions Saturday. So it's 5 sessions on quantum physics and the faith, on creation, science behind faith, etc. And I want to tell you, as I've been preparing it, I've taught on quantum faith periodically throughout the years. I've never done it like this. I've never added so much to it. I've been studying and researching for a long time on this, and I don't know if it's going to be any good, but it feels like it's some of the best stuff that God has ever allowed me to see. And I'm really encouraged and excited about going and doing it. I think it's good to do it up there, so if I screw it up, I get it better and do it better if we ever bring it back here. So don't tell them I said that, though. But we would love for any of you that want to come. It is a free conference, but you do need to register. There is a registration link that we'll send out for everybody, and that's because they're providing all the food and workbooks for everybody at no charge. So if you want to come, it's free, but they would prefer to have a registration so they can prepare for you. And that'll be in November. So look forward to doing that. Okay, tonight we're going to return to our series entitled The Way. In that series, we've been exploring the early disciples of Yeshua. We've explored the way in which they practiced and preached their faith. We've been looking primarily in doctrines and beliefs. And we've been down a lot of roads with these disciples, and we're going to continue to move into an area now that moves us into some significant discipleship. And I want to lay out kind of a foundational thought for you, a kind of a template tonight to categorize for you how discipleship kind of looks. In fact, here at B1, we have a vision statement that says we're building a community of disciples, one Shabbat at a time. And the key word in that whole phrase is disciple. Discipleship, then, for me, comes in 3 different levels. And we're going to get a lot of scripture tonight as we go through, and this is kind of a teaching night. So if you're a teaching kind of person, tonight's your night. If you want to take notes, there's going to be a lot of opportunity here tonight. Discipleship's kind of in 3 levels in my mind. First level, level 1, is personal. And this is the level where most of us begin. Obviously, we're born again. Say born again. We get filled with the Spirit. We get immersed in water. We begin to learn and to practice the faith. We learn about prayer, Bible study, the laying on of hands, miracles, signs, wonders, a supernatural life. We learn things about like conflict management, how to love people, how to forgive people. These types of real world areas of our life in God and with other people. And we grow. And we learn how to kind of love God and, quote unquote, love people. And it's really personal spiritual development is this area of discipleship. And it is critical, and it's ongoing for your entire life. You never leave level 1 discipleship because you're always learning and growing on a personal level between you and the Father on how to live this life of faith. So you never leave this. You want to build on it, but you never actually leave this area. You're always going to be in this. But I will say, for probably some 80 to 85% of the modern construct of Christianity today, this is the place where they stay. Most pastors teach to the self message, the improving of the self. Some of it's good stuff. It's not bad, but it's just pretty much about me and the Lord. How do I get along with the Lord, and how do I get along with other people? That's where most people live in discipleship and in the Bible, is in that category of my personal walk with God. And they don't ever move past that level. And I don't think that's where God wanted discipleship to end. I think that's where God wanted it to open the door, begin, and then move us into another level while continuing to grow in level 1. And I call this level 2 community. Community discipleship is where the followers of Messiah now are part of a local congregation of some sort. And in that, they begin to grow as they connect into that group. But there's a lot of confusion about what that looks like and what that means, which is what we're going to begin talking about tonight. Most congregational life kind of tries to look at itself and say, are we healthy? Are we a good congregation, if you will? And there are measurements that are used. Like what does it mean to actually, what are we supposed to look like as a fellowship? So that's level 2 community, and I'm going to talk about that all night tonight. I'm not going to talk about level 3, which is the next level, and if the Lord allows us to, we'll get there in a couple weeks. And that is kingdom discipleship. Moving from personal to community to the world, the kingdom issues, the kingdom of connection, how we all fit together in a kingdom worldview. That's a third level. It's more universal. But tonight I want to examine just the community level. And when we look at the community level, there's some things that we look at. What is the biblical worldview of the community? Reviewing kind of our community even and seeing where we stand up against that. But before I get to the historical views and try to bring us into it, and before I get to the biblical scriptures that I really want to hone in on this evening, I want to ask us a question, and I want to kind of give you a behind-the-scenes look at how most congregations look at things. And the question that's asked many times is, how do we measure our faith community? Many congregations do that. They look and they have assessments, and they try to figure out, how are we doing? And that's not a bad question to ask, but it depends on what you use to measure it. Two of the measurements that are pretty traditional and are kind of the big measurements are ones that are not bad, but I don't think they tell the real story. But two of them are this. Do people give their time and talent to serve the local faith community? The other question is, do they give their money? So we measure money and time and talent volunteerism. And we say, are we healthy with finances and are we healthy with people doing stuff? Now, I just want to give you some real numbers so you can, sometimes we live in a bubble. And I just want you to hear some real numbers so you know what's really happening out there. 77% of American Protestant churchgoers say tithing is a biblical command. 77%. Now, out of that 77%, 5% actually tithe. A study in 2022 showed that the average per capita church giving was about 4.35% of the household income. That means instead of tithing by 10%, the average person was giving 4.35%. Ministry Brands stated that when they did a survey that the numbers are anywhere between 2% and at the high end 5%. A survey by churchsalary.com found that the average per person giving in the United States is $2,816 a year. which means if that's the tithe, that person is making $28,000 a year. The numbers vary on average by the size of the congregation, and they actually go down per person the larger the congregation. At 50 people in a congregation, it's usually $2,600 per person average. 150 is $2,500. You get to 5,000 people, and the number's gone down to $2,200, $400 less per person in a bigger congregation. Well, they'll take care of it. So this is a measurement that's done, and it's just one of the ones people look at. And it kind of tells you, are people actually doing what they say they believe? Another measurement is volunteerism. And volunteers pre-pandemic, 44% of people who attended church regularly were volunteering on a regular basis. At the pandemic, it dropped to below 20%, and it's recovered back to about 35% as of last year. The median number of hours given by a volunteer is 24 hours per year. The high end that was measured is 70 hours per year. And the national volunteer rate that's given, that these organizations that do all the statistical analysis stuff, is they say this saves or would cost $34.79 per volunteer hour. So that's kind of the value given when you volunteer in the national averages. Of course, these are higher and lower depending on where you are. So in a congregation, for example, of 150 adults, 150 times 35%, 52 people would be volunteers. They would average, say, 35 hours a year, 1,820 hours of volunteer work for the congregation, and the economic impact would be about $63,000. So these kind of numbers are what's done behind the scenes. By the way, I've never actually done these numbers for B1. So these are done behind the scenes for other congregations because I've never actually done this. I have no idea what ours would be. It'd be interesting to crack those numbers and just see where we are in the averages. I don't know. Because that's not the measurements that I use. I'm not saying they're wrong measurements to use, but do they really tell the whole story? Is giving money, is volunteers, getting those numbers above the national average, does that equal success in the body of Messiah? What are the right questions to ask? I wonder what the real data we need to look at is. Maybe something like, are we independent disciples who are fully engaged with God? And are we doing it by ourselves, or are we connected to each other? Are we supposed to connect to each other but put lots of boundaries up? Are we supposed to give ourselves fully into community and serve one another? Is community even the right word? Does it describe the biblical model? So I want to explore some of these questions with you, and I want us to explore them through the Bible. What does the Bible really teach us? When Sherry and I lived in Athens, Georgia in the 1980s, we gathered with people as we got born again, and we found ourselves drawn very close to them. We were young, we were passionate, and we were decidedly discontented with the status quo. Our idea of congregational life was never just attend or listen and learn, give a little bit, and then spend the bulk of your life or your time on what you want. That was just never our feeling or belief. And we brought that to Birmingham when we moved here. In fact, that was why we moved here. There was a congregation here that was attempting to really do life together. They were teaching a message of parents working with other parents to help raise kids. Business people working with other business people to do joint ventures and pool resources. Skilled individuals, encouraging them to use those skills to assist those in need in the congregation. And on the surface, it was a message that really tagged our heart. And it was what we wanted. But in the inner workings of that particular group, it was unhealthy and it created problems. having been through that, I really want us to not only be biblical, but biblically practical. And in order to discover what biblical community is, what it believes and functions as, we have to use the Bible as our standard. Most people, when asked, would simply say that a biblical community believes in Yeshua, believes in the Bible. People will go to services, they'll try to be good people, and they'll possibly try to witness once in a while and bring some people to salvation. And I want to suggest to you that there's a lot more to community than that. So I want to begin tonight and carry this into next week. And I want to start by defining some terms that are used in the Bible that give us a foundation and a template for what community actually might look like. 4 words I want to go over tonight. The 4 of them are kahal, say kahal, edah, ecclesia, synagogue. The kahal is in the Hebrew Scriptures about 123 times. And it's the actual meeting place of people together, people meeting together, rather. This word is a noun and a verb, and usually in the Bible it's translated as assembly or congregation. And each time it has to do with gathering together for a purpose. So when the word is used to address the assembly of Israel, it's about the big group, and they're gathering for some reason. In fact, the first time we encounter this word is in Genesis 28, verse 3, and it says, God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company or a kahal of peoples. Here this word reiterates the promise to Jacob that had been made to his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham. His descendants would become an assembly of people, a united people. Leviticus 16:33, it says, he shall make atonement for the holy sanctuary. He shall make atonement for the tent of meeting and for the altar. And he shall make atonement for the priest and for all the people of the kahal, the assembly. Here it refers to all the people who worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. And remember, this again is the tabernacle in the wilderness, and it's included with that is the mixed multitude that came with them out of Egypt. So this is a general assembly of the people. Now we're introduced into a second word with this next passage. Numbers 14 and verse 5 says, then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the kahal, the assembly of the congregation, edah, of the people of Israel. The word edah is used 149 times in the Hebrew Bible, and it's translated in several ways. And it usually means a sense of a fixture. It's like an assemblage, a concourse, it's a family, it's a crowd, it's something of a closeness of people, okay? And both of these words are translated as assembly and congregation in the English almost interchangeably. Kahal primarily gets translated as assembly in your English Bible. Edah primarily gets translated as congregation. And in some newer translations, Edah is translated as community. In Exodus 12, verse 3, tell all the Edah, congregation of Israel, that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household. So here the Edah is the congregation of those who are going to do the Passover. That each one would be a believer, a follower, a disciple in our vernacular, and they are following God, and they'll do the Passover. Numbers 1 and verse 2. Take a census of all the Edah, the congregation of the people of Israel, by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male, head by head. Here we see that there's a census being taken, again, of all those who are considered part of this family. Numbers 1 and 16 says, these were the ones chosen from the Edah, the congregation, the chiefs of their ancestral tribes, the heads of the clans of Israel. Joshua 1:8 says the whole congregation, the Adah, of the people of Israel, and here we go, kahal, assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them. So here, when they go in the conquest, now we see both words, the congregation, the people, the believers, those who conquested, those who were together, they're the Adah. And what did they do? They assembled. They gathered for purposes. That was the kahal, now they're called, the assembled ones. So you see these verses that kind of give you a synonym, and yet there's some small variations. And people who have studied this stuff for centuries have provided different conclusions. The King James Version translates Adah as community almost exclusively. Kahal translated as assembly almost exclusively. The NIV switches it up a bit. And so these words are similar in a sense, meaning a group of people. And we have words like this in English. We use the word community and fellowship almost interchangeably, don't we? These are the dictionary definitions. Community, a group of people who live in the same area, a group of people who have the same interest, religion, race, etc. Fellowship, a community of interest, activity, feeling, and experience. Companionship, mutual association of persons on equal and friendly terms. A partnership, company, or state of being together. I mean, these are like different ways to say the same thing. We use two words to define them. But these words like community, fellowship, Adah, kahal, they can be very similar, but they also can carry some nuances to them. For example, you may say, I'm part of a community, a group of people. A person says, well, I live in an HOA community. Everybody got depressed. Who understands that? A neighborhood that has many people of the same general financial station, families or singles though, kids of all ages, similar interest in one way as they commune in the area where they go to restaurants and entertainment, but they don't really know each other. They don't all have the same values. So a community like that is used as a community, but it may not be a biblical community. A fellowship, on the other hand, might be different than that. We say here at B1, we're B1 Fellowship, a group that maybe is like-minded. We are a community, but as a fellowship, maybe we have shared goals, shared interest, shared desires, that we function more together rather than just a general community of people. You know, in the movie The Lord of the Rings, which I happen to love that movie. Anybody else like that movie? Yep. I love that whole trilogy, and I love Tolkien's writings even better. It's a quest to return a ring of power into where it was fashioned so that it can be destroyed, because it's a bad ring. And there's a group in the middle of the movie that come together to return that ring. And that group during the speech is called the Fellowship of the Ring. Notice they didn't call them the community of the ring. They're on a quest to do something together. They pledge to each other to do it together. What an important distinction. A kahal community may be a gathering point, but an Adah might be the community or fellowship as a rallying point. And it's just a nuance. It's not right or wrong. It's just a nuance. Think about it this way. You may attend a congregation or a community and be part of that. You might even decide to join it. But when you become part of a fellowship, you move into a shared mission with a focus to engage at all cost. Fellowships do not break as easily as general community. Organizations have members, like many things. Fellowships don't always have to have members because everybody just knows who they are. In a historical biblical example, when a person was born into the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or the 12 tribes, They did not have to become part of that community. They were already part of that community. But they did have to agree into the covenant, which we could use the word fellowship possibly. And we know that many of them rebelled in the covenant. That didn't mean they weren't part of the general community. How many of us know people that would claim to be part of the community of faith but may not quite live like it? When we look at the biblical story of Ruth, we see a Moabite woman who decided against her mother-in-law's wishes to give up her covenants with the gods of Moab and commit to say, your God will be my God, and your people will be my people. Now, we don't talk like that, do we? When someone comes to faith in Yeshua, we don't ask them to say, now repeat after me, your God will be my God. And we certainly don't ask them to say, and now your people will be my people. Can you imagine coming to the membership class? I need you to say, your people are now my people. I'm joining the congregation, and now we're all on the same page. We're all your people and my people. We're all the same people. We simply say, receive Messiah and join the congregation because you agree to some things. When I was preparing this message, I remembered how long this has been in my heart and my language, but how foreign it seems to most people. When the congregation we were part of, that I told you about earlier when we moved here, fell apart, Sherry and I were a bit lost. We didn't actually know what to do, where to go, how to recover. It was a pretty devastating situation. So we flirted with doing nothing, staying at home and enjoying life alone for a while. We connected with a few people and did some Bible study, and then we decided, well, we'll dance around with some churches and see what's out there. So we attended a congregation for a little while. Went to a congregation, and at this congregation, after about 4 weeks, the pastor came and asked me, what are you looking for in a quote-unquote church? And I think he was looking for a standard answer. Oh, a good music program, good children's ministry, good teacher, good doctrine, convenient times to meet. Convenience for me is important, right? Summer camps for the kids. Short sermons. Not long-winded, blathering on and on and on. And I think he was looking for the standard answer. And I think what I told him shocked him, and I know it did, because a week later in his sermon, he said, I met with a young man, and he told me this. And I was that young man. I said, what I'm looking for is my people. Who are my people? Who am I to be a part of? For I need them, and they need me. That's the kahal and the edah. Now we have two more words we got to cover. And the next two words help us to get a little closer to understanding maybe the plumb line that we're going to be aiming for in the next week or two. The Septuagint was commissioned in the 3rd century BCE. It has its origins in Alexandria, Egypt, and it was translated between 282 and 132 BCE. And the process of translating the Hebrew to the Greek gives many non-Jewish people a glimpse into the Judaism and the belief system that the sages had in those days, as they chose Greek words that would try to communicate what had originally been written in Hebrew. According to an ancient document called the Letter of Aristeas, it's believed that 70 to 72 Jewish scholars were commissioned during the reign of Ptolemy to carry out the task of the translation. The term Septuagint means 70 in Latin, and the text is named after the 70 scholars who supposedly did this. The first word is what is used whenever you see the word kahal or edah, assembly, congregation, in Hebrew. It's what's used when they translated it into Greek. And that's the word ekklesia. The other word that we're going to look at in a moment is synagogue, which is also an interesting word that's used. In fact, it's a very interesting note that the first time the second word there, synagogue, actually appears in the Bible is very, very early. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered, and the translators wrote synago, which is a form of synagogue, together into one place, and let the dry land appear as it was so. So here in the Septuagint, the word gathered is a form of this word. And they chose the word evidently because to gather in a location is a foundational understanding of the word. God in Genesis 1 is gathering the waters together under the heavens and bringing them into one place. Now, if you'll permit me a little leeway here, I want to wax super spiritual for just a moment and maybe take a liberty with you. Water is life to man. It's the physical source of life. And without it, we die quickly. You can fast for 40 days from food, but 3 to 5 days after not having water, and you're getting near life support. Too much water, though, at one time, and you can actually drown. You can die from it. The perfect balance is an absolute necessity when it comes to water. And that's the source that God put on this earth for life to be viable. And this gathering of water in Genesis 1 could be called a gathering for life. In Yeshua's words, the mayim, water, gives and leaves one from him without thirst. If you'll drink the water that I give you, Yeshua says, you'll never thirst again. He is life. And the fact that the Septuagint uses this word to gather in reference to the water, and specifically in the context of gathering the water into one place, maybe it's a little bit of a reach, but maybe it helps us to understand that the synagogue was a place of gathering together for life. A physical location that said, this is where you can receive the gift of spiritual life. When the context demanded that the word kahal represent a place, the sages translated it as synagogue. And when the context of a passage demanded that the edah had to be in a place, the sages chose the synagogue as the place. And when it was an assembly of people, they chose ekklesia. So we could say from the scriptures even, the kahal, edah, or ekklesia of people who are called to rule would gather for life together around the kahal, the edah, or the synagogue, a place that supports life of God in his people. And it's a picture. It's just a picture that God is giving us of what we're supposed to be about. Lee Levine, who's a professor of Hebrew University and probably one of the foremost experts in synagogue life, ancient time and modern, he writes, first and foremost, the synagogue served the full range of needs of a particular community. Interesting word. As documented in contemporary sources, such functions included political meetings, social gatherings, courts, schools, hostels, charity activities, slave manumission, meals, sacred or otherwise, and of course, religious liturgical functions. Interestingly, when you look back at the history of the synagogue coming out of the exile, when it really first appeared on the scene out of the Babylonian exile, it became a place of gathering for life, but it wasn't just religious life. It was an investment that said the religious life was part of your entire life. So it became a place to talk about everything. It was not just to talk about one thing, i.e. the Torah. It was to talk about the Torah and how it dealt with our political life, how it dealt with our family life, how it dealt with our business life, how it dealt with all things that were happening in the culture and the society. And it was a place, in fact, the historians point to the ancient gates as the seats of authority, and the people, the leaders of the community would go to the gate of the city, and they would station themselves there to discuss the important matters of the city. And historians point to synagogues as being the new gate of the city, that this is where the leaders would come to discuss and work through all the things of a city and how it was to function. Isn't that interesting in light of the word synagogue, that we think about when we gather as a community, as a fellowship, we tend to live in the world of this is my religious life and then there's my real life. In fact, people get very uncomfortable if I or a pastor or somebody stands up and begins to talk about cultural things, particularly if it's politically a hot button. Come on. Now, y'all don't, because y'all have been here for a long time and you know I don't care, so I'll talk about anything. So y'all are awesome. I mean, you're great. So this is not about, that part's not about you, because you're amazing. But in the world of modern church Christianity, modern Protestantism, and even Catholicism, it is dangerous to talk about anything outside of pick a verse in the Bible and be there. And it's dangerous to use that verse to make a statement about the culture. That's not how it was, the template. In fact, the word ecclesia was chosen specifically by the sages. It was a Greek word, obviously. It was a Greek word. And it was used for the city leaders. They would call the ecclesia to the gate to make decisions. How strange is it? Think about that for a minute. Your word in the apostolic writing that is translated as church, which is a word that came 1,000 years later. It's not a word that was used in the first century. It's not a word that was used when the apostolic writings were written. That word wasn't there. The word that was used was ecclesia in the Greek, and a better translation probably should have been the gathering of the congregation or the assembly. We could have been called an assembly or a congregation, would have been a better translation. But what it really means is the congregation or the assembly that rules the society. The ecclesia is not a group that gets together to just have a self-help message. It's a group that gets together for the kingdom of heaven to come to the earth and change and transform the entire earth. That was the context. In fact, if you go back and study, and now I'm way off subject, but if you go back and look at Caesarea Philippi, Mark chapter 8, you'll find a story where Yeshua is saying, "Who do the people say that I am?" And you know the story. Who talks? Who speaks up? Peter. And what does Peter say? You're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. You're the Mashiach. You're the one who's going to save us all. And what does Yeshua say back to him? Okay, you didn't get this on your own. It's a revelation. And what's the next part? And on this rock, I will build my, it's translated as church in most translations. The Greek there is ecclesia. But what's interesting, the very next line says what? And the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Interesting. The word against is not in the Greek. It's set up, the way it's translated, as though hell is going to be beating the body of Messiah constantly. Now, it's not going to win, but they're going to blows. Boom, boom, boom. That somehow or another, the gates of hell are coming against, and they're just whipping up on the body of Messiah, the ecclesia, or in the English translations that people have, the church. A better translation is that, and on this rock, and just put a pin in that for a minute, I'll come back to it. On this rock, I will build my ecclesia, my congregation that rules, and the gates of hell shall not be able to withstand it. It flips the script. It's not hell coming against us. It's us putting a beating on hell. And when you understand ecclesia, you start to see we're not the subservient ones. We're the rulers. And the problem is the body of Messiah has taken a back seat. We've sat in the back instead of in the front. And that's because we haven't understand what ecclesia is. And that it's an extension of the kahal and the edah that came forward out of the wilderness and conquered the promised land. Walks in the covenants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then rules in the society. And isn't that what the psalmist wrote? When the righteous rule, even the wicked rejoice. So there's a piece here that we're just missing a little bit. Okay, pull that pen out for a second. This isn't part of the message at all, but just so we have a proper interpretation of this rock thing. If you were to ask a Catholic brother or sister, what does it mean, upon this rock I will build my congregation or church? A Catholic brother or sister would say, well, Peter's name sounds like the Latin word for rock, Petra. So, upon Peter I shall build my church, and therefore everybody should be Catholic. Now, if you talk to a Protestant, they're going to protest that. And they're going to say to you, wait a minute, no. I'm a Protestant. It's not upon that rock of Peter. It's upon Yeshua. He's the rock of our salvation. 1 Corinthians 10 says that he was the rock in the wilderness that followed them along. He's the rock. And so that rock, that's who it is. We build it on Yeshua, the rock, so everybody should be Protestant. May I suggest a third possibility? Yes, please. Thank you. I appreciate that. Only one person wanted to hear it, so I'll talk to her. Oh, Michael wanted to hear it, so I'll talk to Michael. A third suggestion might be this. They're standing at the cleft of a big rock area, and there's a cave there. And that cave is a place where there has been worship to demons. It's called Banias, and it comes out of a word, Baal, and I forget the right word at the end of that. Forgive me for not memorizing that. I don't have it in my notes anyway, but it means prince. So this is a place that means the prince of Baal, Baal's prince, and it is an area called Caesarea Philippi, and they would say that it was called in ancient times the gate of hell, the gate of Hades. Now Now think about what I just told you. Ecclesia. Upon this rock, this gate of Hades, I'm going to build my rulership, my body of rulers. And that gate cannot withstand what's coming. Come on, y'all. So our ecclesia is a gathering of citizens called out of their homes into some public place, an assembly, a calling to be gathered together that rules its society and its culture. So maybe when the synagogue and the ecclesia are combined, you get a plumb line. Maybe the place where we gather in our homes, in our community fellowship here, maybe the chosen places of our gathering that have purpose and anointing attached to them, and the proper understanding of an ecclesia, a rulership community that is on point with same mindset, joint purpose, connected to each other for a common cause. Maybe that's a plumb line we should be shooting for. And the questions now that we have to ask ourselves then and see where we are is, what makes us the ecclesia or kahal of God? What practices did Yeshua hand over to his disciples? What practices did his disciples hand to the congregations they started? These are the places where we've got to explore and see, are we really being the kahal, the edah, the ecclesia? So, Father, I pray now that as we move into this next week and examine the practices of the disciples and the communities of faith, that you would help us to see where we are to the biblical standard, that we can do what you've called us to do right here in Birmingham, Alabama, and that we would be who you've called us to be. We give you all the glory in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.